Welcome back to the Unanimous Decision Podcast. I'm your host, DPalm. Follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, all your socials at DPalm66. Follow the show on YouTube at UDPod66. That's right, YouTube dragging this podcast into 2015, one episode at a time. As always, brought to you by the good folks at the MTR Network. You found us, don't lose us. Subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on Spotify, subscribe everywhere you get your podcast for free $99. Also brought to you by Daniel Palmer Mortgages. You can afford your rent. You can afford a mortgage. It's my job to help you qualify. Make sure you check out my other podcasting venture, Life, Love, and Real Estate. We're talking about planning for the future that you want and taking control of your life. It's going to drop next Wednesday. Very excited for you guys to hear it. And I know what you're thinking. Man, it's been a big podcast day already. We heard myself and Nata this morning talking about the NBA. This afternoon, we dropped another podcast. That's right, Felder Friday. We're talking about the Heisman race. We talked about coaching carousel and what exactly makes one of these jobs a good job. But today, I could not let the week end without yelling at you guys about something I've been yelling about since it all started. That's right, we're talking about gambling and its proliferation in sports, how that's reared its ugly head this week. And I want to kind of give you guys a 30,000-foot view of the story so you can get the news from a source that you guys at least semi-trust. So, Thursday morning, the sports world was rocked. Arrests across the NBA. Terry Rozier was arrested. Damon Jones was arrested. Chauncey Billups all arrested, put in handcuffs, put in leg cuffs, paraded in front of people. Look, this is an insanity check. You should check that out if you want to hear my thoughts on gestures wildly about the world. I will say this. It is a decision to put millionaires in leg cuffs and portray them, particularly millionaires who are brown and black in this country, and to put them in shackles to make them look like violent criminals. Is Terry Rozier guilty of a crime? Maybe. I don't know yet. You believe the podcaster / FBI director? Cool. I'm not there to say, oh, he did or didn't do anything. Is Terry Rozier a criminal worthy of public parading and detention of his legs? Crimes against basketball? Maybe. Let's have a conversation. These crimes that Kash Patel's putting out there to get his pat on the head from his daddy, I don't think so. Doesn't qualify for me. I don't love it. Let's look at the charges here. Terry Rozier has been accused of shaving points. He's been accused of being parts of prop bets where he'd say to his peoples, hey, go ahead and bet the under on my props. I'm not going to be playing a lot tonight. He'd then fake a foot injury or have a foot injury, and people would make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of Terry Rozier, which no one's ever said ever in the history of America. This is notable because Terry Rozier was popped for this last year by the NBA. They took note of it. They saw the betting trends. Who's betting prop bets on Terry Rozier? Great question. Let's ask that question. Let's unravel this thing. The other person arrested, Damon Jones. He's the one that's going to connect the two cases that we're talking about. Damon Jones was apparently also using insider knowledge to help people make bets, including his knowledge of when and where LeBron James will be playing. He also was part of the scheme with the poker scheme. What poker scheme? Glad you asked. And that brings us to our third arrest, Chauncey Billups, NBA Hall of Famer, former head coach. I'm recording this on a Friday afternoon, so I have no idea. Alleged head coach of the Portland Trailblazers. He has been accused of being a face to bring in people to lose at high-stakes poker games. Now, if you're like me and you have your natural distaste and distrust of this administration, you're thinking to yourself, dog, we're arresting people for poker games now, and I want to put you at rest today. If you are at home and your people come over and I'll put down $5 in the pot, $20 in the pot, $100,000 in the pot. As long as that money that goes in the pot is accounted for at the end of the night by the players, your poker game is legal. Your poker game is legal. An illegal poker game is one that's set up in a place that has the table take a certain percentage of every pot called the rake. That's what happens in Vegas. That happens in other places. Essentially, you're running an illegal casino. That is illegal, and that's why I thought they were bringing in Chauncey Billups. Because, again, I don't trust these folks. Then I read some of the charging documents. Allegedly, Chauncey Billups and these folks, and we'll get to who these folks are in a second, would bring people in, say, hey, come play some cards with Chauncey Billups. And through the course of the night, they would be using advanced techniques such as contact lenses that could see the cards their opponents were holding, X-ray machines on the tables, cameras set up in chip holders. It was theft by any other name. Aside from the thought that they have better technology than the security at the Louvre, this is wild. And it gets wilder when you hear about who's involved. Because if you're like me, you're about 40, 45 years old, there are certain things in this country that are a relic of a time gone by. The 40s and 50s, the NBA thought wasn't going to survive because certain groups had their hands in the players and were using them to manipulate games. Because you must know, when there's only 5 players on a court, it's a lot easier to put your thumb on the scale of an outcome. Cash Patel's charging them alongside La Cosa Nostra. Those who don't know what that is, that's the mafia with a capital M. We're talking about the 5 families, the things that you thought were gone, things that were kind of parodied in the early 2000s. Well, they're back. And they've got their fingers in NBA betting, allegedly. I say allegedly because if the mafia is back, then I better say fucking allegedly. Allegedly. Look, I don't know how this all gets started. I don't know if it comes into Chauncey's like any of these people for some money. I do know these guys are a competitionaholics. They love playing. They love competing. They got to have something on the line all the time and everything. So the question becomes, what was the way in for this? And we don't know that yet. We're going to find that out in the course of them unraveling all this quote unquote investigative knowledge and things are going to show. The inside information of like Terry Rozier talking about his injuries and prop bets and Damon Jones leaking out to people because maybe they owe money to the wrong folks. That was always going to happen. When you put, that's always been happening. Let's be very real. When you put gambling in bed with your sports, you welcome the problems gambling already had. One of the problems gambling's already had was people were trying to scam the gamblers, which is, hey, look, we're all breaking the law. I guess that's kind of no honor amongst thieves. They brought their game to the legitimate side because their offshore bookies were recognizing betting patterns. And you better believe bet your ass the NBA and NFL has those same patterns. So when they catch these patterns, they run up the flagpole, they find out what's up. Because guess what? Now no one has ever made money off of Terry Rozier except for these folks when he didn't play those games. That was always going to be predictable and always a problem. The problem I see is now, how do you get in? How do you get Terry Rozier, who's making $26,000 a year until $26 million, dollars a year until his contract is voided in the next 48 hours? How do you convince them to give you information? Well, one thing could be, hey, he's just my boy, Chauncey Billups, casual at a table. Man, Trailblazer, you can't say it in public because, the media, but we are definitely tanking this year. You're banging unders every night. That's inside information. Or Terry Rozier saying, hey, I'm going to sit down for 10 minutes because my foot hurts. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's also inside information. That one's a little bit sketchy. The Chauncey Billups, like the poker thing, is the one that I keep coming back to because this isn't that. This is proof that, and the connection of the two is the proof, that whatever they've got their fingers in, whatever they got their hands on the pulse of, it's bigger than we even know right now. Why do I say that? Because we've already seen evidence at lower levels of players shaving points because they say to you, hey, no one's watching the St. Louis game. Go ahead and shave some points. Except when the action comes in on a regulated site, now they are watching that action. They are asking the question, who knows what about this? We've seen baseball coaches in college get caught up in this shit last year. We're watching NBA players. We watch NFL players lose entire seasons behind this shit. If you think this is the last gambling scandal, you're very, very wrong. You're making the same bet these leagues made when the live sports revenue dried up during the pandemic and they said, open the floodgates to gambling. Look, I understand. Everyone thinks it's kind of fun to put $1 or $2 on the game. But when you look at a live sporting event and you see them come out of commercial and people are on their phones making fucking prop bets as opposed to being engaged with the sport in front of them, that should be worrisome to the length and health of your leagues. If the main thing isn't the main thing, then what are we doing? Sports are not entertainment. They are entertaining, but they're not designed to be entertainment. They're designed to be athletic competition that you have the providence to wager on. And look, I've been the guy yelling about sports gambling, saying how bad it is, how it's going to kill the country. All right? We don't know yet. I will say this. Maybe sports gambling, saying that is a problem. Maybe saying that's the devil is too far. What might be the devil, what definitely is closer, is putting the casino in your fucking pocket. It's one thing to have the access to say, I can gamble. It's another thing that says, I can gamble whenever I want if I'm bored on my phone. You can scroll Instagram, you can go to Blue Sky, or hey, you can put 5 on the Lakers. Not in Georgia, you can, unless you have a VPN or whatever. I wouldn't know anything about that because I don't fucking gamble on sports. My new hurdle in my life, like the one thing, while I go through this stuff, and I use this thing as a sports diary, as I talk about these things and I encounter these things and I kind of navigate the world, I talk to Felder every Friday, and I talk to Nada. One of the things I'm realizing is a thing that my father never had to worry about with me, I have to worry about for my son. How is he going to engage with the world of sports or the world in general? Is it strictly going to be a quantitative experiment to see how much you can maximize, or is it going to be true enjoyment and engagement with the thing in front of him? If I never talk about stat lines in front of my son, that means I won as a father. And you know how I know that I'm fucking right? When ESPN was covering this story on their airwaves on Thursday, you could watch in real time the chyron at the lower right side that said ESPN bet, go away. They know they're complicit. They know they're in the bed with it. And you're not going to get a whole lot of truth telling about this because guess what? All of our sports properties right now brought to you by gambling. They're going to tell you why it's good because, hey, without it being legal, they wouldn't have caught it. They're going to tell you, hey, this is protecting the integrity of the sport. No. That you can't tell me that everyone before 2020 was flat out wrong and just losing out on a revenue stream. There's more to the world than making a buck. And you've poisoned the world once again to prove that point. Make sure you come back, hang out with us. Check out the other things that have been posted today. Check out what's coming out on Tuesday. Check us out next Friday with Felder Friday when I've got to convince myself that this Florida thing isn't going to blow up in my face as a Georgia fan. That was your show. There is no outro. See you guys next week.